This week on Quick Save the Podcast, we're discussing our most anticipated games for the rest of 2020 and looking back at Respawn Entertainment, developers of Titanfall and Apex Legends, and what they'll be remembered for this generation. Check the timestamps below to jump straight into the discussion. Hello and welcome to the one, the only Quick Save the Podcast. I'm your host Mitch, and joining me is the least most anticipated game of 2020, Callum.
Greetings.
So out of 10, what would you rank 2020 so far?
In terms of, are we talking games releases?
I'm not being specific, I'm just saying give it a rating.
It's been a very strange year. I'd probably say a 5. Like, I feel like it's gone really fast. I don't know if you're the same. Like, it's really, like, I can't believe they're in the second half of the year.
Faster than it feels like it should.
Yeah.
There are times where it's been quite slow, and then it's gone, like, whoosh again.
Yeah, definitely. What about you? Overall ranking?
Probably a 3. 3.5, probably a 4. 4? Lots of delays and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And just a very like weird kind of disrupted year. Like it's the events that have happened with have just affected like everything. Like it's I
bleeped what you just said because YouTube gets mad. And we can't talk about I have to beep that too. It gives you a big have you seen those warnings for it on videos that mention it?
No, I don't think so.
Like something from the Australian government. So like, yeah, here's the thing about you've mentioned, and now it's just seeming like we're swearing a whole lot because I'm just using the regular beep.
It's very triggering for people.
Yeah, instead of saying which I have to also beep. You don't know what I just said there unless you read my mouth, and if you did, you're a so I want to talk about something to look forward to, something that drives us to maybe give it a higher score in the end, because we're talking about our most anticipated games for the rest of 2020. Because currently there hasn't been a lot of good games out.
Yeah, I feel like with this year, it's been, even with everything, like bearing in mind like what's happened at the start of this year, I feel like it was always going to be a year that had probably a stronger second half as well. And I know that kind of often happens anyway.
I wonder what for.
And there's been a lot of games that like we thought were going to be earlier, but then got pushed into later and stuff. So it's been kind of a weird year, but I think it'll be quite a strong end to the year. Assuming that some of these games actually, don't get delayed again into 2021.
I have a good feeling about the rest of 2020.
Yeah,
and
it seems to be a strong finish.
Unless a huge volcano erupts and kills millions or a meteor hits, I think we're going okay.
Yeah.
So we're kind of in a cool place moving into a new generation. We've got a new kind of range of topics planned for about what will we remember about certain developers this generation, starting with Respawn Entertainment, but we'll get there because we're going to talk about our most anticipated games. None of them by Respawn. We made a list, cut off a lot. Started with Halo, and the thing that upsets me is I don't want to feel this about Halo. Halo Infinite should be the most exciting game of the year for me because, like, growing up playing Halo, I know you're a big Halo fan as well. And just to be like apprehensive about it, to be like, I don't know if 343 are going to be able to do it.
Yeah,
that's scary.
Yeah, for sure. Like like thinking about it, like you say, like Halo should always be, the year that it's coming out. Like it was always such a huge deal. You know what I mean? Like even for it was obviously the flagship of Xbox, but even just in general, there was this kind of sort of mystique around Halo and stuff, and people were always really excited for it. But it's almost crazy that like I feel like for this year, I'd almost kind of forgotten that it was confirmed for Q4, you know what I mean? Like it's crazy that I'm saying that, but it's like with all these other games in and around it and stuff, it's kind of lost that kind of like that same power that it used to have.
Yeah, which is odd. You'd think like it would be up to par with like The Last of Us Part 2. Everyone was so excited for that. Halo Infinite should be that, but it's not. But there are things that have me hopeful. Like they're using the old armor, so they've obviously listened and know their art style for the new games is shit. I'm kidding. I actually kind of liked it, but it's like 343 for going for their own thing, and then they decided to go with what was popular in shooters with 5, which I've said my opinion so many times on Halo 5. I feel like a broken record. I hated it. So yeah, it's potentially open world.
Yeah,
and that's kind of fascinating.
Well, that's the thing that I think is actually kind of interesting about this game, and that I actually think is kind of a good thing, is that they're being a bit more cryptic about it, and they're not really revealing a huge amount of information. I mean, like, considering that it's confirmed for Q4, like, we're not really that far out from it, and we still don't really know a huge amount about the game. Like, as you said, we know that it's kind of, they're increasing the, you know, the scale of it and stuff, but we don't really know kind of too many specific mechanics and stuff. So I'm kind of like you. I'm kind of just cautiously optimistic about it. I'm kind of just, to an extent, almost putting it out of my mind, but I'm still excited for it to see where they go next, given that it's also the final game in the trilogy, like this new trilogy that they're doing. So I really hope for the best. I hope that it turns out to be a really good Halo game.
Yeah.
But I'm, again, as I said, sort of cautiously optimistic, given that I think that they've had kind of mixed results so far with the franchise. The good thing about Halo is there's so much to kind of draw from, like in terms of the lore and stuff. Like there's always interesting characters they can bring in and interesting kind of settings. So they definitely have a good well of like kind of ideas that they can draw from. It's really just, you know, a question of how they sort of execute it.
Yeah.
And I think the multiplayer as well will be interesting to see, in that one of my problems with Halo, especially with 5, is that it kind of lost its identity as Halo in terms of the multiplayer. Like it was becoming more sort of quote unquote like COD-like and less like Halo, like it originally was.
Like aim down sight and stuff, clamber, like these are all Call of Duty things.
Yeah, exactly. So it kind of, to an extent, lost its identity as Halo. But I hope for the best. So fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Halo Infinite.
So the game, I think, is exciting, and it's about damn time, because it's Crash Bandicoot 4. It's about time. And I'm excited to see what a new Crash Bandicoot game can be. And like the rumors are of like 100 levels. Like this is the insane trilogy worth in a single game. And what gameplay they've showed off shows that Toys for Bob are the developers known for Skylanders and the Spyro remade trilogy. So yeah. I think it's in the right hands, and I'm very excited to play this game in October.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I didn't play the Crash remastered trilogy,
Insane
but I was
trilogy.
Yeah, the Insane trilogy. I was which is kind of, again, just because of like kind of competing games, like not because I sort of didn't want to get around to it, but I was a massive fan of the original games growing up. I think I played most of them, like certainly the platformers, and then also kind of the spin-off like racing games and stuff.
You didn't want to play the trilogy. You didn't get around to playing it.
Yeah, no, not the remastered ones or like the remade ones.
Oh man, they look so good.
Yeah, they look fantastic, and like I think obviously that was, you know, a big litmus test to like see like how well that would sell, like if they wanted to do a sequel. And from everything I've seen, like the remade trilogy did exceptionally well. Like it sold really well. So yeah, I'm really curious to try this one out. I think it looks really cool.
I'm curious how the 100 levels goes. See how.
Yeah, it's a lot of levels, yeah.
See how the quality continues, because that is a lot of levels.
It's a question of like quantity versus like quality at that point.
Yeah, and it's sort of scary. You don't see Crash going down that same path, like the path to oblivion. Like they killed Crash. And after Crash Team Racing, the trilogy, I really want to see Crash Bandicoot be the icon he once was.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like, it'll be interesting to see whether it can kind of reclaim that throne, like based on kind of like sales and just kind of like how well this new game does, because like this is kind of like a new entry in the series.
Yeah.
So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it sells, like how consistently good kind of the quality is across the stages and stuff. But I think everything we've seen so far looks pretty promising.
And the next one is sort of, I could say my most anticipated, but it's only in early access. And that is Baldur's Gate 3 by Larian, makers of Divinity Original Sin 2.
Yeah.
Maybe my favorite game of the generation, though it's on PC. So basically, I know it's, for a lot of Baldur's Gate fans, this is not what they wanted. But as someone who is not a fan of Baldur's Gate, who really likes Divinity Original Sin, and just started to play Dungeons & Dragons, I couldn't be more excited, because it looks like they're taking everything they learnt from Divinity, everything they learnt from probably playing Dungeons & Dragons, to create the most exciting game in this genre I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I'm really intrigued by this game in the sense that, like, I obviously, like, I don't have the experience with the classic games and stuff, and it's obvious that they're trying to, like, bring it into like a new generation and try to create like a new kind of like fan base for it and stuff as well, which I think is the right move. Like kind of obviously using stuff that's much more in line with what they did with Divinity Original Sin 2. But the thing that made me really sort of excited about it was that cinematic trailer they showed off.
That was a very good cinematic.
Yeah, I think we watched it together, and it just kind of the production values and just the kind of like polish of it was really cool, and it was really kind of like horrifying and kind of like scary and stuff, and it was just it really kind of sold me on this game that like I wasn't really invested in from the previous games.
Yeah.
And it's cool to just see like a new studio taking over that's had a really great success over the last few years as well.
Yeah.
So it was a game that ordinarily I probably wouldn't have been that excited for, but I'm actually it's definitely on my radar, Baldur's Gate 3 for sure.
Yeah, it's on my buy immediately when available.
Yeah.
Because it just like, as you're saying, the cinematic really shows the effort they were willing to put into this.
Yeah.
And it's definitely good to see Larian, who historically haven't really been a well-known developer.
Yeah.
And now finally to get their shot at making this game, which is basically, it's kind of reminiscent of like the 90s when BioWare and stuff started coming into creation. Just like making Baldur's Gate and stuff like that.
And there's been such a resurgence in those games as well, you know what I mean? Like with Pillars of Eternity and like all these other games that are kind of like harking back to that era, but still doing their own thing, like trying to like do something new as well. So it's cool to see. And what I like as well is they're obviously a studio that are like very transparent with like showing off gameplay and like showing what it's actually like. Like they've, which is good to see.
It's the CEO who's playing it in all these demos.
Yeah, like those developer walkthroughs and stuff. Like it seems to be kind of like rarer nowadays to see that, but they're actually showing off like, really good chunks of gameplay and what it actually looks like.
Unfiltered, really being as you said, transparent and just showing you this is the game. And that just shows you the pure passion this studio has.
Yeah.
Like other studios are afraid to show stuff early. Halo Infinite isn't being shown off until months before its release.
Yeah.
So like there are studios who are careful and there are studios who are transparent enough and confident with what they're doing that they're willing to show it off.
Yeah.
And not be afraid of criticism and to probably take it on board.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's good to see.
So the next thing I want to talk about is coming out in the next 2 weeks. And it's a game that's been on my radar for a long time. And that's Ghost of Tsushima, which was one of the first videos that is now gone. So that reference doesn't work that well anymore. But it was the first one that got significant views. And it's like exciting the first time that happens. And while that hasn't consistently kept happening, it has been a game that was very exciting the first time they showed it, but now they've showed it in more detail. And like, I'm so excited to see what Sucker Punch have been developing all these years.
Yeah, for sure. Like it was a game that always conceptually, like kind of like you were saying, always conceptually seemed really cool, but because we hadn't really gone hands-on with it, we kind of weren't sure. Like you were saying before, I think it's really admirable that they've actually, shown off kind of like extensive kind of portions of this game in the lead up to it coming out. Yeah. And like the game looks, it looks gorgeous. Even just on the technical level in terms of how they've realized this world, like it really does look stunning. And it's a real showcase for what consoles can do right at the end of this generation. Yeah,
it's like looking at all like particle effects. But like when you see all the leaves fall down, like the wind effects.
The movement of the
everything
cape fluttering.
Just visually just looks like this is the final game of this generation. And and talking about confidence before, like showing that off is something Sony has been really confident with. Whereas it kind of shows you the difference between Microsoft and Sony. In terms of one is being more open with its big, heavy-hitting games, and one's like, don't look at it. Don't look at it till it's ready. And I think Tsushima has what looks like a really good combat system. And they showed off a video recently of the combat system that reminded me a bit of Neo.
Yeah, I remember thinking that as well, in the sense that like...
And it's not just because it's in Japan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not just a setting. Like it looks to be... it'll be interesting to see difficulty modes and stuff, but it looks to be like, just given the type of game as well, I think it'll be a cool game to play on high difficulties as well, like to make it a more kind of punishing experience, just for that kind of immersion and stuff. But I think the feeling I get from it, I'm not sure if you're the same, Mitch, but it really reminds me of Horizon Zero Dawn, like not obviously in terms of the game itself, but in terms of what's happening with the developer of the game, where it just seems like they've you know, they're obviously known for the infamous games and stuff, which were, you know, quite respected games in their own right. But it just seems that they've now just kind of like taken the next step to another level. And it's both on a technical level and just kind of the ambition of the game. It looks like they're kind of, you know, possibly they're really kind of big kind of like statement game. And I think it's really exciting. And what I like actually about what the developers have said, even before that gameplay showcase, is they seem to be really passionate about like the historical period and about the setting. So they've really gone to lengths to try to make it feel like really realistic and stuff and kind of true to the period, which I think is cool as well.
Yeah, in terms of history, it's like such a cool area to explore.
Yeah,
like during the height of the Mongol Empire, and they still couldn't even land on the mainland because they failed to take Tsushima. I'm curious how true to the history it is. It just looks so exciting, to be honest.
It does. Like, the more I think about it, like as a historical time, like I think it interests me and intrigues me just as much as what they're doing in Assassin's Creed, and possibly even more so. I just think that, and just the, you know, the beauty of the world as well, like what they've showcased with like you were saying, the detail with like the leaves falling and kind of the wind moving through the grass.
How varied the environments look like with the cherry blossom trees, and like talk about a setting. That game looks so good.
Looks beautiful.
So we're finally here, our most anticipated game, and
It's no surprise.
Yeah, It's been delayed, and it's been delayed,
and it's been delayed,
and it's been delayed. But Cyberpunk 2077 is coming out November 19th, probably. And this is a game that was announced in 2013.
Yeah,
with that a really cool trailer. But man, it has been a long road. And like talking about confidence, CD Projekt are confident. They are so confident because they've shown us so much of this game. They're doing little updates. There may be one in the next couple weeks, a bit more Cyberpunk. They've given it out for other people to play, not us. We're not special. And everything is just overwhelmingly positive.
It is like they've. I think it's cool that they've the people that have got access to it haven't really been able. They've only really been able to kind of talk about it, like not really show off gameplay. But I think there was that they showed off a good 4 or 5 hours, didn't they? Because I think there was a video I was watching where they showed the gameplay they had access to was all 3 starting areas, because apparently there's like 3 different kind of like starting narratives.
Yeah, depending on your kind of character. But I think what Cyberpunk is doing incredibly well is how that world the world looks like it's indescribable how good this game looks, how big this game looks, and how Witcher 3 has basically meant that no matter what this team makes, it's going to be exciting. Yeah,
for sure. And it's like the one word that I would use with this game, which I think was like true of Red Dead Redemption 2 as well, is like ambition. Like it's a really ambitious game, and it's like I kind of get the sense that like, given just the sheer volume of it and the size of it, like not everything necessarily will work maybe as planned, or like we saw that thing recently about like how there was a mechanic that was kind of removed and the wall running mechanic. Yeah. And it's like, I think that's kind of inevitable with a game of this size. Like it's inevitable that like ideas will be kind of like not fully fleshed out, and like things will maybe not work as well as others. But given the sheer kind of like, as I say, ambition of it, like it's a really important thing for the medium, like to have games that really try to push the boundaries like that in terms of the level of detail and just the sheer size of the world. You know, they're talking about like how many hours it might take to beat this game and stuff, and it's just it's really exciting.
And it's like 9 districts. I didn't even realize an outside area was going to be part of it.
Yeah.
So it's really incredible and almost overwhelming how big this game can potentially be.
Which even to an extent, like it's crazy thinking about it, but like even Witcher 3 which had kind of mainly 3 distinct areas, but like this is, Witcher 3 kind of had that where it sort of felt overwhelming at times, but I think this one will be even more so. Like it's, how much time do you need to set aside to really kind of explore this world?
Yeah, like there's a reason it's our most anticipated. And I'm planning on getting a computer that like comes out around the same time. So that makes it it's probably the first game I'm going to play on it. And like the things this game supports on PC, which is like DLSS 2.0, which you're unfamiliar, is basically there's a AI built into the chip that upscales images to higher than they should be. So a 1080p image can scale to 4K or higher, basically a bit better actually in their examples. But with the performance of that resolution, so it's just like this game's gonna look good, run well, and just be game of the year.
Yeah, I mean. That's the thing. I can't really see, especially given the backlash against Last of Us 2. Like, I don't know whether that will spread, because it was very like well received critically. It'll be interesting how that plays out, but I can't really see much else that's going to be able to compete with Cyberpunk 2077. I think just looking at in terms of like what's coming out for this year, I think it's definitely going to be kind of the obvious choice.
2020 still got a lot of games to release.
Yeah,
we don't know all the launch titles for the next gen consoles. There's a lot we don't know yet, but for now, this is our most anticipated games for the rest of 2020, and I can't wait to delve into playing lots of them.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so moving on to a segment we're going to repeat, but basically weeks on end is what will a developer be remembered for this generation? So we're looking back at all the games, well, all the developers we think had an interesting generation, and I think we want to start off with one of the more interesting ones, a new studio formed basically just as this generation started. That is Respawn Entertainment. And so I think Respawn Entertainment were one of the most exciting new studios, and throughout this generation they've proven themselves again and again. So I think we should start by saying it was founded by ex-Infinity Ward founders Vince Zampella and Jason West, who are basically why Call of Duty is what it is, and developed the best one, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. I stand by that.
And it's yeah, I agree, like certainly in terms of the multiplayer. And it's interesting that they kind of emerged from the ashes of like that game. Like it was like literally like, to me, almost like the high watermark of that series, and then it kind of ended really bitterly between them and Activision. They ended up forming this new studio. Yeah. So it was kind of an interesting sort of evolution of like how that studio came about, like after this really great game, like a really successful game.
And then they created a game published by EA for the Xbox One launch, was Titanfall. And I think Titanfall was a very exciting game that was going to show you what multiplayer can be in this generation. And I don't think it was fully ever reached the potential of what this game showed off right at the start. But basically, first-person shooter, mechs, I mean, already what more could you want? And like a really cool online multiplayer, mixing in a story campaign and multiplayer games at the same time. Yeah,
for sure. And also something they really sort of like pushed with that was also the AI, like the fact that like AI would be like a big part of it, where you'd have these really big battles as well. And like they were kind of marketing that as like a really big next gen thing. Like it was, to me, it was a game that even from the marketing and kind of the way they pushed it, like it actually felt as if it kind of earned that title of being next gen, like just kind of the scale of it. And it was very fluid, the movement and stuff, like the wall running, and it was like very fast paced, and it just felt like something kind of fresh and original.
And they somehow added an auto aiming pistol that was well received, which is like
smart pistol. Yeah.
I'm amazed that went through. I think the AI were called drones, and there was like lots of regular AI, but then there were players as well, which kind of gave you a better feeling of scale. And I think the designs for everything in this game were really cool. The mechs were awesome.
Yeah, and it was like I think it was to be admired, like really, and I think it was like part of them, like obviously forming this new studio after COD. Like it was just cool to see them doing something in a genre that it just had seemed to be stagnating for a while as well.
Yeah,
like it just kind of like needed something like new that wasn't just kind of like a fresh coat of paint and stuff. And
arguably, it still needs that.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like the actual mech combat itself, I think as well felt like really right. Like it felt kind of like really, you know, sort of like heavy, and like it just had that kind of weight behind it, which I thought was really cool. So it was, it was a very, I think probably the thing that held it back the most was the lack of content, like at least at launch. Like it pretty much had like no single player content to speak of, really.
Yeah.
And it was, it sort of, even in terms of multiplayer, it didn't have enough longevity, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, well, that's why they tried the campaign in multiplayer scenario.
Yeah.
And after that, they worked on Titanfall 2. This is one of the more interesting times of like learning lessons of when to release a game.
Yeah, big time.
And the lesson is, don't release it between Battlefield and Call of Duty, because there's already enough shooters. Those two big ones.
The two biggest, I mean, basically the two biggest rival shooters, like in that genre, yeah.
And then you release another one in between it. Utterly stupid. And such a shame, because Titanfall 2 is a successor in every single way. I think the addition of a campaign, and not just any campaign, like one of the best FPS shooter campaigns ever made, in my opinion. It was quite short, but it came with so many different ideas that really just like kept it interesting throughout those 5 hours I played it.
Yeah,
for the first time. I 100%ed it. I did everything in that campaign. And like, I didn't regret a single second I spent playing that campaign because it was just so good. The combination of mechs and all these different mechanics. There's a certain level that people have spoken about to death where you click between past and present, which gave me Portal vibes, which is always a good thing because Portal is incredible. Like, it just really was a good, solid 5 hours of just pure entertainment. And that's what a shooter campaign should be, I reckon.
Yeah, and it's like interesting when you say that because like I never played Titanfall 2, but I remember reading reviews that said like very similar to the vein of what you were saying, that like this actually really shows like what a good like first person shooter campaign can be, because it wasn't bloated in terms of its length. Like you said, it was like 5-6 hours of like just really entertaining, fast paced, like fun. And that to me is kind of something I think that's been lost even within shooters as well, where they feel like they have to be, you know, really drawn out and have like super long cutscenes and be like really long. But it's like, if you can have a really tight, like anywhere really between 5 to 8 hours, like for a shooter, like that's a good length. Like you can do that in a couple of settings and it's really enjoyable. And then it had that great multiplayer to go along with it. So it's a shame that it launched at the time it did, because it could have been a much greater success than it was.
Yeah, and it could have. It's like, it's funny thinking back, like out of all the shooter games, like I don't often go back and 100% it complete on the max difficulty.
Yeah.
But I did for Titanfall 2 because I loved it just so much. It sold 4 million copies, which is a bit less than the 7 Titanfall sold, obviously because of where it launched on all platforms, mind you. So that is just further example of like, don't do that ever again, with a Metacritic higher of an 87 by 1 point.
Yeah.
So after that, they worked on a game that literally came out of nowhere. There was kind of leaks, and then it was out, and that was Apex Legends.
Yeah.
And I just want to say the stats we got because
it blew me away. Yeah, I
did not realize how good that game was. After 8 hours, there were 1 million players. After a week, there were 25 million players. After its first month, there were 50. As of the release of...
It was early this year, wasn't it?
Late last year was Apex Legends Season 3 with 70 million players throughout the world. So you were thinking, like, I guess we were thinking at that point, like, Battle Royale is kind of on the downhill. Like, Fortnite's clearly won. And then in comes Apex out of nowhere by a really good studio.
Yeah, like is there place for like, you know, like another kind of like massive, kind of like in, you know, MOBAs now as well. Like it's, like it was so interesting to see it sort of come in at that time.
Yeah, and it's weird that it overtook PUBG, because that was, the OG was PUBG, that rhymes. And it is the third fiddle now. Like Apex just swooped in under the radar and decided to have a go at Fortnite and got very close to succeeding.
Yeah, and it was very something I didn't realize, because like I think we're both kind of the same, where it's just kind of like not really our thing. Like we're not really. It's obviously the in vogue thing at the moment is like battle royales, but it's just something I've never really kind of like got into that. Well, I tend to gravitate more towards single player games nowadays anyway, so it probably would have interested me less anyway. Yeah, and it's also a very, like, looking at the reviews for Apex as well, it's a very like critically respected game as well. Like it's very like you know, obviously you know, very polished and like very respected. So it's just looking at those numbers, I mean, it's incredible that they have had that reach where they've reached 70 million players. I mean, that's as of last year as well. You know, end of last year.
Talking about how Respawn have done so well for EA, because just before this, they were purchased by EA. So kind of a good purchase by EA for a publisher that's had not a great look, and now releasing one of the most incredibly successful games.
Yeah.
Now coming to Steam, coming to Switch, coming to everywhere. So, like, really cool to see Respawn to succeed so well after 2 games that were successful, but
didn't reach, certainly didn't reach that level. And like you said, it's interesting that it's now carved them out as like a genuine competitor to Fortnite, because it probably almost seemed kind of like a foregone conclusion that Fortnite would just be dominant in that kind of like space. So it's cool to like, just for the pure like competition, like it'll keep within that like industry, like them kind of innovating and sort of competing with each other as well.
Yeah. And like hitting that amount of players is something not even games like Halo and Call of Duty can offer.
Yeah, I mean 70 million is a huge amount of players, but by any metric, yeah, that
is a hard number to hit, and Respawn did it. So like, talk about a great start for a studio.
Apex Legends started this generation,
And then what they did next was working with one of the, if not the biggest pop culture IP on the face of the earth, Star Wars, and Jedi. It was Jedi Fallen Order, released absolutely stupidly. I still hate this to this day. Where Andrea Renee went over to Vince Zampella in the crowd and went, "We're making a Star Wars game." He said where it's set and stuff, and that was it. I'm going to remember that as the dumbest announcement for a video game as long as I live.
Yeah, and it was so crazy because it was for not only like a really good studio that like had made Titanfall and stuff, but like for a Star Wars game, which is like a huge deal, like by any standard, especially, you know, like a good like campaign, like third person, like Star Wars game that was like, you know, really like high production values and stuff. Like it always struck me as so odd, that announcement.
They got the director of God of War 3, Stig Asmussen, to jump over to their studio to helm this game. And like, to get the director of that game to be in charge of a third person action kind of game is a very good decision.
Yeah,
and
sure.
It definitely paid off with the game being as good as it was. And it's one of the best Star Wars games I've played, despite them tackling ideas that maybe didn't work and it being a bit buggy at launch. Like, they have admitted they rushed it out just because Disney probably wanted it out for the movie.
Yeah.
Of Episode 9. And so it released on November 15th and sold more than 10 million units by March 31st this year. So I think it's well deserved that it did as well as it did, because obviously it's Star Wars, but it merged Star Wars with Dark Souls effectively.
Yeah.
And it put a little bit of sprinkle of Titanfall with the wall running and a little bit of Uncharted, and it just, while it being nothing, it didn't reinvent the wheel or anything like that. But like games before, like World of Warcraft, they combined things that worked from a lot of other games to create this kind of best case of all of them.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what they did with Fallen Order. Had a lot of good moments, a lot of highs. Felt like a Star Wars adventure.
Yeah.
Set in the best time period, which is between 3 and 4. And yeah, I just think as far as Star Wars games go, it's one of the best in a long time. Yeah, so really, for a studio, like, this is a really good start. And then latest title will be Medal of Honor Above and Beyond.
Yeah,
VR
VR
Oculus
game.
Rift, which I just want to say I love the title because it's Medal of Honor Above and Beyond.
The Call of Duty.
Call of Duty.
Nice, like, sly reference to that.
Despite it being VR and like Activision, they've been worried about it. Going into next gen though, Vince Zampella is heading DICE LA, which he's gonna rename. And my assumption is probably Respawn related, because that's such a successful line. They've said they will be making a Titanfall 3, and EA CEO Andrew Wilson referred to November 2019's Jedi Fallen Order, the start of a franchise. So clearly this studio has places to go, and basically what will Respawn Entertainment be remembered for this generation? It's for Apex's success, being one of the most successful new studios in recent memory. A bit of originality in FPS, sort of went on to affect Call of Duty again, and a very successful brand new IP called Titanfall.
Yeah.
So like, talking about a studio's start, that is really
It couldn't
incredible.
really be much better.
And yeah, with that, I think it's time to get a bit Metacritical. Each and every week, we jump through the jungles of Metacritic to bet on what an overall score a game will receive at launch. This jungle is filled with a lot of bad things. I think you've been shot how many times?
I think about 5.
Yeah,
There's
about
a
5
lot
times.
of hazards. Like,
Yeah, I got bored by a rhino, and like, I don't know why the rhino
Other
was even in the
creatures
jungle. And it's kind of weird. So this week we're betting on Bloodstain, Curse of the Moon 2. So the first game was originally just a spin-off of Ritual of the Night, the proper 3D-ish 2.5D Metroidvania Symphony of the Night spiritual successor. And so Curse of the Moon 2 is basically like the first game, an 8-bit Castlevania clone with linear levels, bosses, and all that stuff.
yeah, and this sequel was announced like it was pretty recently, right? As well.
A week ago?
Yeah.
And it's got some cool things, like it's got a whole bunch of new characters, it's got co-op, lots of cool stuff, and it's kind of weird that this game is getting a sequel out of nowhere.
Yeah, it is.
Clearly
Yeah,
Bloodstained is an IP they want to work on, so it's now time to bet on what score we think it'll receive. And what are you feeling? What are you feeling on this?
So I'm going to say I have seen what the previous game got. So it like came out to a pretty good reception. I want to say it was somewhere around 82, 83. I think it'll probably obviously like iterate on what they did previously. I think it should be a pretty good sequel. I'm going to say 85. Go quite high with 85.
Yeah, I'm thinking it will be definitely better than the original. and because of all the stuff they're adding. So basically, I think because of iterating on it, I can't pick 85, which was what I was thinking of. This is going to give you a lot of leeway to move because I'm going to go with an 86. Let's go 86.
Right, yeah.
There is no middle. It's either if it's above me, I get a point. If it's below you, you get a point. So, thinking of points, admittedly, I forgot to give out points the last 2 bets. So, it's obviously time to fix that. So, on last episode, you and I bet on Desperados 3. I said it'd get a 78. You went with 75 and joked that it would get an 85.
I think 85 or 86. Yeah, and I think
you.
That's literally what it got.
I got an 86. So it spites you, gives me a point. I feel good about that. But last episode, Russell fought for your honor. And luckily you had someone to fight for your honor because, well, I don't think it really mattered because I made a dumb decision anyway. Because we're picking a score for Star Wars Episode 1 Racer, game I had lots of fond memories with. And he went with a 70. And once I went with a 78, which is the score I seem to love. So it got exactly 70.
Yeah.
So the score is 3-2. I'm still only 1 point ahead.
I'll take it. Thanks, Russell.
We'll see what happens with Blood saying Curse of the Moon 2. We might be back on the score we started off at the first episode. So I think that's it for this episode of Quick Save the Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I've been Mitch. Thanks for joining me, Callum.
Cheers, no worries.
Let us know what you think in the comments below. What's your most anticipated game for the rest of 2020? We'd love to hear from you. If you really enjoyed the episode and want more though, subscribe to see the other 5 episodes and be ready for the next several hundred, several thousand, 2 million. Hope we'll see you there, and as there's always a podcast to save, and we need you to save it quickly. Goodbye everyone. Bye. So out of 10, what would you rank 2020 so far?
It's been a very strange year. I'd probably say a 5.